Our next inductee will be receiving the New England Icon Award. So I hit up Joe and I'm like, what am I doing? I'm saying names, I'm bringing up presenters. You're inducting our next inductee, and that is WWF, WWE, I don't even know what to call it anymore. Steve Taylor, ladies and gentlemen. So if you don't mind, I am the inductor of the inductee. So as our business evolves over the years and decades, we are fortunate to have the ability to look back on the history of our industry through literally thousands of videos out there in cyberspace. Personally, I'm a magazine guy. I'm 54 years old. I bought my first magazine in 1979, and it's how I got my news on the wrestling industry long before there was a thing called the internet. As I get older, I love to look back at pictures from old magazines because, yes, kids, they were actually a thing back in the day. From the magazines and event programs to the legendary 8x10 photos that are very popular among collectors today, including our organizer of this whole event, Mr. Joe Bruin, and my good friend Kurt Adonis. This was the guy behind the lens. And who can ever forget the iconic images of Hulk Hogan slamming Andre the Giant in front of 93,000 people at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan back in 1987 at WrestleMania 3. An interesting fact of Mr. Taylor's history, part of pro wrestling history, took place back in 1983. And it comes from Classy Freddie Blassie's book, Listen, You Pencil Neck Geeks. Thank you, Kurt Adonis, for the tip on this when I was sweating my you-know-what off about inducting Mr. Taylor. When Hulk Hogan was wrestling in the AWA, Steve Taylor went to an event in Chicago, caught Hogan as he was coming out of the ring and said, "Hulk, let me get a picture." And if this is all wrong, Steve, then Freddie Blassie's a friggin' liar. Steve took the picture, shook Hogan's hand, slipped him a business card. That card was Vincent McMahon's. Steve told him, "Here's Vince's number. He wants you to call him tonight." Vince flew to Hogan's house. The deal was made. Hulkamania was born, and the rest is history. Pretty friggin' incredible stuff. So ladies and gentlemen, give them all the applause. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame class of 2023, Mr. Steve Taylor.
Thanks, Rich. I'm much more comfortable being on the other side of the podium and taking pictures instead of talking. It's great to be here in Rhode Island. I have some great memories covering shows in Providence and all over New England. We lived in Connecticut for 30 years and retired in New Hampshire. New England and its wrestling fans are something. I had a nice short 2-minute thank you speech all set to go when Joe texted me the other day and said, "Make sure you tell your stories. And there's no time limit." I threw that one away. Here's my new one. But don't worry. It's not as long as it looks, as the type is big, so I can read it. Most of you don't know, but I was an amateur wrestler in high school and college. I was captain of an undefeated team, a county champ, and a 33-1 dual meet record, but I never dreamt that I would end up in the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. It's an honor. Thank you very much. It was 40 years ago this weekend that I began my journey with what was then known as the World Wrestling Federation. 1 month before that, while working as a news photographer in upstate New York, I covered my very first professional wrestling event. A sports writer there, Ed Helinski, was a huge wrestling fan and needed a photo for his story. I needed a picture page for the Sunday paper. Sergeant Slaughter, Ivan Putski, Big John Studd, and others were all there. Danny Davis was the ring crew and referee there, and he would later end up working for me. It made a great picture page, and Ed sent a copy to Vince McMahon to say thank you for letting us cover the event. Vince loved it and invited us down to the Cape Cod office for lunch. Well, that sounded like a good way to spend the day to me. He wore one of his very colorful suits and told us his plans of taking the WWF worldwide. I thought, this guy is nuts, but if he pulls it off, that'd be awesome. He then offered us both jobs. I was skeptical at first, but we both decided to leave the newspaper and join the WWF. Ed would stay on as WWF magazine editor for 4 years, and I would stay on as photography director for 9 years before handing the camera over to talented photographers like Tom Buchanan, Rich Frieda, John Giamondo. I spent another 13 years at the WWE as vice president of event operations. My first day at work was covering the WWF event at Madison Square Garden, the mecca of professional wrestling. What a way to start a new job. I would later end up working at MSG for 13 years after leaving the WWE. The first WWF offices were in Cape Cod Coliseum. My office was in the locker room, and every time that they had an event, I would have to pack up everything and store it in Linda McMahon's office. I was employee number 10. It was a very small company. I was tasked with competing with legendary wrestling photographers like George Napolitano and Bill Apter, both of whom were always helpful to me, even after Vince kicked him out of ringside to give his WWF magazine exclusive photos. I was always amazed at the many different ways my photos were being used. Besides the magazines and programs, they appeared on promo photos and posters, lunchboxes, back-to-school supplies, merchandise ads, trading cards, T-shirts, and anything else they could come up and sell. Most of them had my photo credit on them. Vince never liked photographers getting photo credit for some reason. One day as a rib, Vince had the mailroom guy change out the Steve Taylor nameplate on my desk with a new one that said, "Photo by Steve Taylor." I still have it. Too bad Facebook doesn't give photo credit, as I see my photos on social media every day. It was a great ride. It took me everywhere from high school gyms to major arenas and giant stadiums. I lived on a crew bus during TV tapings. American Airlines made me a gold member for life after flying more than 1 million miles on them. I have traveled to 49 of the 50 states. I will get to South Dakota one of these days. I was in 22 different countries, which was fascinating, meeting wrestling fans around the world. TWA lost my luggage on the way to my first Middle East tour. Finding American-style clothes in Kuwait was not an easy task years ago. I took 2 months off to be the still photographer in the hit movie, No Holds Barred. Who remembers that movie? It was, more than I thought. If you look closely, you can see that I also played the role of a photographer during the wrestling scenes and press conferences, kind of typecasting. My wife played an extra in a couple of the scenes when she came down to visit me at that time. Did you know my daughter was one of the flower girls in Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth's Wedding on pay-per-view from Madison Square Garden? My oldest son was the ring bearer. I got a chance to work with some of the greatest athletes and entertainers in the world, like Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Sergeant Slaughter, the Fabulous Moolah, Rock, Jesse Ventura, Jimmy Hart, Cyndi Lauper, and so many others, including new Hall of Fame members Barry Horowitz and Mike McGurk. That was my very poor attempt at a Howard Finkel imitation, by the way. The people I got a chance to work with, like Ed Cohen, Tim White, Bill Dunn, and Howard Finkel, were awesome. I had the privilege of teaming up with the late, great Timmy White, going to Australia to produce the TV introduction vignettes for Outback Jack. We named our team Flat as a Lizard Productions. We had a blast traveling around the Outback, filming Jack with crocodiles, herding Brahma bills, and drinking beer in the Humpty Doo Hotel. We were never asked to produce another TV segment. I don't know why. After that, but we sure had a ball. After I was a photographer, I was in charge of event operations. We were in charge of the entire non-TV side of events: rings, stages, lights, audio, pyro, and even gimmicks. When the Godwins had their entrance carrying the pigs, if you always remember that, we had to get them. One night, we always used rented potbelly pigs as they were small and easy to carry. One night we got stiffed by a farmer who refused to pick them up after and never returned. I found a home for 2 of the pigs with the local crew, but we still had 1 left. I decided to take it home, as potbelly pigs make great pets, they say. Flying with a squealing pig on a plane ride home was very embarrassing. Our kids loved the pig. They named it LT, like BLT, but without the bacon. It was easy to get him housebroken and trained. LT got along great with our dogs. Only trouble that he kept growing and growing and growing. The vet finally told us it wasn't a potbelly pig, not a miniature pig, but a Wilshire pig that would grow to 400 pounds. We ended up finding a petting zoo that took the well-trained pig and had room for it to grow. The kids were heartbroken to give up LT, but it was the right thing to do, and we ended up getting another dog. It is a great honor and very humbling to be included with this group here. I have great respect for everyone who has ever laced up the boots, wore a manager's jacket, a referee jersey, or picked up an announcer's mic and entered into the squared circle. I had the privilege of photographing them doing what they loved to do. I enjoyed every minute of it. I remember one day in Stamford, Connecticut, we had a big meeting about designing a new ring. I was in charge of the ring setup at the time, so I sat around and listened to the boys tell us about what they liked and didn't like about certain rings. They're not all the same, I was told. Bruce Pritchard and Pat Patterson pointed out to the group that I had never taken a bump in the ring before, and perhaps I would have a better understanding if I did. After a quick bump lesson, one of the boys body slammed me very gently a couple times so I could get the feel of the ring. I, of course, didn't sell it, not one bit, but I was in pain for at least the next 2 weeks. I don't know how the talent does it night after night. I played a doctor once in a skit for the TNT show, but never got in the ring. I first want to thank Joe Bruin for including me in the 2023 Hall of Fame. Thanks, Joe, for keeping up the interest in fans collecting promo photos and inviting me to my very first Fan Fest. I look forward to meeting the fans as well as seeing old friends. Thanks for making the segment that World Photography did on me the most watched of all the segments, with 67,000 views on YouTube. I would like to thank Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon for giving me the opportunity to join the company in the beginning years and watching it grow. Working with Vince was a real experience, to say the least. I have never met anyone like him. I guess I should tell at least one Vince story. One night, we were taking the overnight red-eye flight home to New York from LA after an event. That was before he bought his own plane. Vince walked back from first class, where I was in coach, of course, and he hands me a package and says, "Take this off the plane." I said, "Sure, Vince." He says, "Aren't you even going to look at it first?" I said, "Vince," I said, if you want me to take something off the plane, I'll do it without questions. Okay? He said it was a shoe, and the guy behind him had taken it off and put his smelly feet near Vince. And he grabbed one of the shoes while the guy was sleeping and brought it back to me. And when we landed, I had to walk by the guy searching everywhere for his shoe, and I could hear him say, "How do you lose a shoe on an airplane?" I could hear him say that. We see the guy in baggage claim later walking around with one shoe on. It's snowing in New York, and the poor guy is probably going right to a meeting with just one shoe. I ended up wrapping it up and giving it to Vince for Christmas. Most of all, I want to thank my wife Angie and our kids for supporting me and putting up with this crazy lifestyle during those years. I know it wasn't easy being married to someone in this business. My dad taught me to dream big, but I don't think he would ever dreamt that professional wrestling would become as big as it has. My mom asked if I was sure that I was making the right decision to give up my photojournalism career for the world of professional wrestling. I wasn't sure when I joined in 1983. But looking back now, Mom, I'm sure. It was the right decision. My mom, by the way, became my #1 fan. It's been a great ride. Thank you, wrestling fans, for making this business what it is today. And I look forward to meeting everyone tomorrow at the Fan Fest and have lots of more stories to tell during my Q&A session. Thank you very much. It is indeed a great honor. Thank you. Thank you.